Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. You wouldn't be intellectually honest if you didn't admit a certain stupidity has invaded and taken up residence in the church these days. How can we say this? By looking at how the enemies of the church and of Christ now view us compared to how they did just 100 or so years ago. As communism was sweeping across Europe and throwing capitals into political and cultural turmoil, the one incessant enemy of the movement was seen to be the Catholic Church. Rome was pilloried by the disciples of Karl Marx, by men such as Italian Antonio Gramsci, who developed an entire system of philosophical thought to assail the Vatican and its millennia-old religion. It was religion in general, and this religion in particular, that the communists identified as the chief enemy, public enemy number one of their plans to remake the world order. So deeply embedded in the life of the common man was high-minded Catholic thought that the young communists conceded that it would take a very long time to root it out. Fast forward to the 1960s, a German communist labeled this effort the Long March Through the Institutions, a reference to the understanding that to unseat Catholic thought, which permeated everything in the culture, was going to be a long, hard slog because the entire culture was steeped in Catholic thought and philosophy at the minimum, if not the actual practice of the faith in reality. The communists openly bemoaned what they saw as the stranglehold on the hearts and minds of people. Karl Marx famously calling religion the opium of the people, the opium of the masses. He had notorious august company in his assessment of religion: the Marquis de Sade, Lenin, Novalis, Kingsley, all of them in turn expressing their frustration at religion, the Christian religion being an almost insurmountable block to their world designs. When Antonio Gramsci was attacking the church in the early part of the 20th century, not much had changed on a cultural level from the 60 years prior to that, dating back to Karl Marx's broadsides. But in the next 60 years, a heck of a lot was to change. This is evident primarily by the fact that the social engineers of our day, the heirs of Marx and his spawn, hurl no such expletives around about the church in our time. Why? Because the church has ceased almost entirely to be the opposition that it once was to their plans of global social dominance. The state has risen to such heights over the church in our day that it is able to freely advance any evil it desires with barely a hint of opposition from the sanctuary. In many ways, it couldn't even be called a fair fight anymore. And why is this? Because the church has given up, or rather many of her leaders have thrown in the towel on any notion of fighting. And by fighting, we mean the training and forming of young minds in the art of philosophical war. What we have today is a war of ideas, of worldviews in which the dominant side, secular relativism, has staked out its ground quite completely with its philosophical assumptions pressed from every side and built upon quite neatly. The weaker side, the church, has almost abandoned its own philosophical stance and now converses quite freely in the language and lexicon of the enemy. Church leaders have bought wholesale into the vocabulary of feelings, being pastoral, politically correct, inoffensive, non-controversial, tolerant, non-judgmental, and in the church's camp, all this has found a home in a bastardization of the most supreme virtue of all, charity. So while churchmen think they are talking in theological terms and sometimes develop a smugness about it, they have actually been hoodwinked and allowed themselves to be tricked into playing on the enemy's turf. Leaders don't lay out Catholic philosophy anymore. Maybe it's because they don't really believe it, maybe it's because they aren't trained in it sufficiently themselves, or maybe it's because they're just too chicken and wimpy to want to confront this Goliath. Whatever the reason, we are suffering mightily because so few in the church are able to actually talk in the basic philosophical terms that the church spoke in for centuries, enabling not just a list of what the church teaches, but actually why she teaches it and why she does. The other camp begins with an assumption of all that matters is this life, It hasn't directly challenged the idea of the actual existence of heaven in any meaningful fashion because the culture isn't quite ready for that, not yet anyway. But it has conjured up in the mind of men a distorted notion of heaven, distorted as to the truth of how few will attain it and its very essence of being united in image and likeness to the Creator. Nope, for modern man, everyone goes to heaven, and it's something like a continuation of any earthly pleasure you can think of. Kind of like how Islam views it, actually. And if you take the reality of eternal life as it actually is off the table, well, then you get an entirely distorted, perverted, really, picture of man. Our whole anthropology is turned on its head. Man is no longer created for God by God and is to live his life related to God. Destroy the end, and you destroy everything. Destroy the goal, and you lose the game. And where is the church? Where are the Aquinas of the day standing up and challenging the philosophy of lies with the truth that gives birth to the philosophy of reason? Are young men being formed in the seminaries, or Catholic schools for that fact, to do combat in the area of battling philosophies? Do most Catholics know today, even know, to press pause in an argument with family members or co-workers and challenge the underlying faulty philosophical assumptions inherent in these honey-poisoned positions? Do they even recognize them? Are they being told by their leaders, instructed by their clergy, reinforced by their Catholic associations to attack with full vigor the foundational principles of the world? Because those principles are lies. No, they aren't. What is being raised is a society of the stupid, Catholics woefully unprepared to do battle and combat these forces. When Leo XIII said Catholics are born for combat, he could not have imagined how quickly we would just throw down our weapons when the opposition appeared over there on the horizon. Now there is no fighting or battle because there isn't even the slightest intuition or recognition that there is a war with all its spiritual dimensions. Even the Bishops' Conference battle over Obama's HHS mandate is being fought on the enemy's turf. We don't fight over the evil of contraception, but over the Age of Enlightenment concept of liberty. That is a huge mistake and an ill-fated strategy and is going to come back sooner or later as a loser. This is why modern-day communists, the social engineers, the Obamas of the world no longer write damning tracts against us. They don't have to whip up the crowd against us because it would be a waste of paper and ink. There's no one left to convince that serious religion is the opium of the masses. People already accept that. Now they just show up at our universities and in our churches and give speeches, co-opting our sacred language about dignity and justice, perverted into a screed on equality and rights, and preach to a largely stupid audience that applauds them and runs up afterwards asking them for an autograph. If Marx and Gramsci and Lenin and the Marquis de Sade were alive today, they wouldn't know whether to laugh with glee or be depressed that they had nothing left to do and to have to check into the retirement home early. The church must regain her intellectual life. She must talk from her mind as well as her heart about the truth of man, the immortality of the soul, the meaning of life, this one and the next, creation, the essence of divinity, and so forth. As long as she keeps quiet on these questions, the modern-day communists will fill the void and continue to enslave the culture, all the while preaching freedom. And it will all be the fault of stupid Catholics to whom was given the task of preventing this anarchy in the first place. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.